All right, today we're going to take a look at complex fractions. Complex fractions are fractions with a fraction in the numerator or denominator, or both really. And we're going to use two different methods to solve. You're going to pick the method you like. For each problem I do in the example, I'm going to show you each method. And again, whatever one seems to make more sense to you, go ahead and stick with it and use that one. Just know that there are two methods and you can just pick. So our first method, we're going to simplify your numerator and denominator in the whole fraction. And then you can write each the numerator and denominator as one fraction. We're going to take our division, which remember our fraction bar means division. We're going to rewrite that as multiplying by the reciprocal, so flipping the denominator, okay? So that's method one. And then method two, we're going to multiply the LCD to every fraction in the numerator and denominator and then simplify. So I'm going to walk through both those methods. We're going to first do some examples without variables, and then we'll look at some problems that have variables. Okay, so let's start with our first one here. This one's not too bad because only the numerator has fractions that need to be simplified to start with. Okay, so we're going to start with method one. So I'm going to start by combining these two fractions. And if you remember, so since we're subtracting, we do need a common denominator. And so for this one, I look at my LCD for my numerator. Okay, so least common denominator would be 8. And so since this is already 8, that means I only have to multiply that second fraction by 2. And remember, whatever we multiply in the denominator, we also have to do to the numerator. So I'm just rewriting that numerator like that. Okay. And so the numerator turns out to be -5/8 minus 6/8, which is -11/8. And then I'm going to put back in that denominator of 2. Okay, so once we're here, now again, this fraction bar, always think, means division. So since we're dividing, I'm going to write it out here for you. Remember, that's 2/1 if you want to make it into a fraction. So we can take our division, we're going to change it to multiplication of the reciprocal to get our final answer, -11/16. Okay, all right, so that's the first method, combining to make that into one fraction on the top. All right, the second method is we're going to look at the whole problem and look at every denominator. Now, this one, again, is a little bit easier because I only have 2. And we're going to say, what's the lowest common denominator of the whole fraction? Well, in this case, it is, again, 8. Okay, so LCD is 8. So we're going to take everything, though, and multiply it by 8. So I'm going to take my negative 5/8 times 8 minus 3/4 times 8. All that over 2 times 8. And then we're going to simplify whatever we can. Now here, because they have an 8 in the top and bottom, remember this is always 8/1, so the numerator and the denominator can cancel out. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. 4 goes into 8 twice, so I'm going to reduce that. And so I'm going to multiply my numerator. So this fraction here is gone. It's just -5. Right here I get -6. 2 times 8 is 16. And we get our -11 in the numerator over 16 in the denominator. So we do get the same answer either way. It's just an opinion as to which one you like best. Doesn't matter which way you do it. All right, so let's try the second one. So again, we're going to take their method 1 to start with. So I'm going to look just at my numerator, and I see I have a 2 and a 5. So you ask yourself, what's the lowest common denominator of 2 and 5? And it's 10, the number they both divide into. In my denominator, I only have 1, so the LCD has to be that number, which is 3. So to make this into a 10, my 2 here, I want to multiply by 5. And that's going to be top and bottom to make them match. And to make this into a 10, I'm going to multiply by 2, top and bottom. Okay. And then in my denominator, this one I don't have to do anything to because it already has that. And then 4. So that is just adding in all those, multiplying so you can have the same denominator to be able to combine. So over here, I'm going to try to squeeze these in. You're going to get 25 minus, over 10 minus 14 over 10, which then we'll simplify that in a moment. -2/3 minus 12 over 3. So right here I have 25 minus 14. That gives me 11/10. In my denominator, I'm going to get, oops, I think I wrote that wrong. Sorry, I meant to put a plus sign there. So here, I'm going to get 10 over 3. And again, my division bar. So when I look at this, I'm going to come over here and do this for you. So we have 11 tenths divided by 10 thirds. I'm going to rewrite that. 11 tenths times 3 over 10. Then I just multiply across. 33 divided by 100 is your final for that. All right, so that's method 1. So method 2, I want to look at the whole fraction to start with, and we want to find the LCD of everything. So I'm going to look, I have a 2 and a 5. We know the LCD is 10, and then a 3. Well, there's no smaller number we can get except to multiply these together to get 30. So my LCD here is 30, okay? And that's for every fraction. So what we're going to do is multiply each fraction by that LCD. So I'm going to rewrite it. So every fraction I write, I'm going to multiply by 30. And I'm going to simplify this down. Okay, so 2 goes into 30 15 times, so I'm going to make that a 15. 30 and 30. Oops, I don't think I wrote that right. Sorry about that. Should have put a 5. There we go. 5 into 30. 6 times. 3 into 30 down here. 10 times. And nothing to cancel there. Okay, so now, if you notice, all of your denominators have been crossed out. So I'm just going to multiply my numerators. 5 times 15 is 75. 7 times 6 is 42. Negative 20 when I multiply 2 and 10. Negative 2, excuse me. And 4 and 30, 120. And then we can just do the math there. So we get our 33 over 100. Okay. All right, so that is without variables. So let's go ahead and take a look at it with our variables, like you've been working on with your rationals. Okay. So let's start with the one we have here. So again, we're going to have our two methods. First thing I'm going to do is simplify my numerator and simplify the denominator. So in the numerator, you want to ask yourself, what is the LCD? And it's 10 because that has a 10. And in the denominator, it's going to be x. So let's come over here. I'm going to not do anything with that first fraction. It's fine. Remember top and bottom. And then I have to multiply by x. So I have a matching denominator for these. So I'll go ahead and simplify those. Oops. So we get 5x over x. And then I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms, combine my fractions. So x minus 30 over 10 divided by 5x minus 1 over x. And again, we have our fraction bar, which means division. So over here, I'm going to write this. We have x minus 30 over 10 divided by 5x minus 1 over x. I'm going to rewrite that as multiplication. Um, 5x minus 1. Since we're multiplying, I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So x times x minus 30 will be my numerator, and my denominator, 10 times. Make sure you remember, we're going to add parentheses just like we did for the other parts with the rationals around those terms because they are connected. Okay, and you can just leave your answer like that in that factored form is fine. All right, method 2, we're going to go back to the problem here and we're going to look at every fraction and we're going to ask what's the LCD. And since we only have a denominator of 10 here and a denominator of x, the LCD of everything is 10x. So again, just looking at the denominators for that part. So every fraction here, I'm going to multiply by 10x. And then I'm going to look, and it should be, at this step, I should be able to clear my denominator. So 10 and 10 cancel. This x is still here, so it will be multiplied. Nothing to cancel here or with this term. But here I have an x and an x that can be crossed out. So this will simplify to, we have x times x, which is x squared. Negative 3 times 10 is minus 30, and then x. All that goes over. 5 times 10, 50x. And then minus 10. And so it gives me that result. And if you look at the two answers, they are the same. This is just the factored form of this. You do have a factor of x that you can kind of take out if you wanted to see that they do match. You don't necessarily have to do the step I'm just showing you. If you take the 10 out of these two, you get your 5x minus 1. Now, in my opinion, I do think method 2 is easier. It is a matter of opinion. Some people like to simplify those fractions first and work through, but if you see, I think it's just less steps. If you're able to recognize that LCD and clear out those fractions, I think it makes it easier to solve.